35 years have passed since Home Improvement first aired on ABC, and yet for a whole generation who grew up watching the Taylor family argue over power tools and backyard fences, the show doesn't feel like history. It feels like something that happened to people they knew. Time has done what it always does, moving through the cast and changing everything. The careers that soared, the ones that quietly folded, the private battles that never made it onto the screen, and the deaths that left a real absence. Between this cast, there are love stories and ruined marriages, a prison sentence that preceded one of the decade's biggest TV deals, a child star who walked away from all of it to go to school, and a neighbor whose face we never saw until the very last moment. Settle in. Some of what happened behind and after this show will stay with you. Number 1, we have Tim Allen as Tim the Toolman Taylor. Tim Taylor was the man who always needed more power, more grunt, more torque, more noise, and in doing so managed to destroy almost everything he tried to fix. He was the American dad as a force of affectionate chaos, and the audience loved him for it. Tim Allen was 38 years old when Home Improvement premiered on September 17, 1991. He appeared in all 204 episodes across 8 seasons, and the show was built almost entirely around his stand-up comedy act. The same act that had made him a regular at the Comedy Store in Los Angeles after years of grinding through Detroit club dates. In the fall of 1994, he achieved something genuinely rare. In the same week, he held the #1 show on American television, the #1 film at the box office, The Santa Claus, and the #1 book on the New York Times bestseller list. At 72 years old in 2026, he is still working. Last Man Standing ran for 10 seasons on ABC and Fox. Between 2011 and 2021, the Santa Claus franchise returned as a Disney Plus series in 2022. He voices Buzz Lightyear in every Toy Story film, and he is currently starring in the ABC sitcom Shifting Gears alongside Richard Karn and Patricia Richardson. He was married to his college sweetheart Laura Dibble from April 7, 1984. They had a daughter, Catherine, born in 1989. The marriage survived his prison record, his years of financial uncertainty, and his eventual ascent to fame. But it did not survive fame itself. He has said he let his family slide as his career exploded, and they separated in 1999, finalizing their divorce in 2003. In 2006, he married actress Jane Hayduke in a small private ceremony in Grand Lake, Colorado. Their daughter Elizabeth was born in 2009. The marriage has held for nearly 20 years. What most viewers of the show did not know was this. On October 2, 1978, 13 years before Home Improvement premiered, Tim Allen was arrested at the Kalamazoo airport with more than 650 grams of cocaine in his luggage. Under a new Michigan law passed that year, possession of that quantity carried a mandatory life sentence. He avoided it by pleading guilty and providing the names of nearly 24 other dealers to federal authorities, and served 2 years and 4 months at a federal correctional facility in Sandstone, Minnesota. He was released in June 1981. A 1997 drunk driving arrest led to a stint in rehab, after which he committed to sobriety, a commitment he has maintained for nearly 30 years. "When I went to jail, reality hit so hard that it took my breath away," he said later. "Prison grew me up." Tim Taylor was the man who always needed more power, but Tim Allen proved that the most transformative force in his life came not from success, but from the moment everything was about to be taken away permanently. Number 2, we have Patricia Richardson as Jill Taylor. Jill Taylor was the wife who refused to stay in the background, a woman with her own frustrations and ambitions and failures who made it impossible to write the mother character off as decoration. She earned every laugh she got by going for the truth of the scene first. Patricia Richardson was 40 years old when the show began, and she arrived at the role just 3 months after giving birth to twins, having replaced Frances Fisher at the last minute. She appeared across all 8 seasons, receiving 4 Emmy nominations and 2 Golden Globe nominations for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series, and never winning either, which says more about the Academy than it does about her performance. At 75 in 2026, she remains active in the industry. She joined the cast of Tim Allen's new sitcom Shifting Gears for its 2nd season alongside Richard Karn and Debbe Dunning, and has appeared in Grey's Anatomy and The Blacklist in recent years. In October 2025, she put her Brentwood home on the market after nearly 30 years. She married actor Ray Baker in 1982. They had 3 children together, son Henry, born in 1985, and twins Roxanne and Joseph, born in January 1991, the same year the show launched. The marriage came apart in 1995. She has spoken about that period with unusual honesty. She lost her parents, her relationship, and the easy momentum of her career all in a relatively short window, while raising 3 teenagers largely alone. Everything just hit at once, she told a magazine in 2011. She was in a long-term relationship with psychologist Mark Klein through the early 2000s and has been on her own since. Her daughter Roxanne married in 2023. Richardson was present alongside her ex-husband Ray Baker, the relationship clearly intact in the way that matters most. At the end of the show's 8th season in 1999, Richardson was offered $25 million to return for a 9th. She turned it down. She has spoken carefully about the reasons, and part of the story involves pay disparity. Tim Allen was earning $1.25 million per episode, while her salary was a fraction of that. She was also newly single with 3 children at home and had no interest in pretending that being the co-lead of one of the top-rated shows in the country while being paid as a supporting player was something she was prepared to continue accepting quietly. Jill Taylor was the voice of reason in a house full of noise, but Patricia Richardson proved that the same clarity she brought to that role was also how she chose to live, with her eyes open, on her own terms, regardless of cost. Number 3. We have Richard Karn as Al Borland. Al Borland was the dependable one, the man who actually knew how to use the tools, who cleaned up the disaster after every segment, who provided the straight line that made every joke possible. He was the anchor that kept tool time from sinking, and the audience trusted him completely. Richard Karn was 35 years old when Home Improvement began. He appeared in 202 of the show's 204 episodes, his plaid flannel shirt and patient exasperation becoming as much a part of the show's visual language as the fence in the backyard. At 70 in 2026, he is one of the most continuously active members of the cast. He hosted Family Feud from 2002 to 2006, co-hosted the History Channel's Assembly Required and More Power alongside Tim Allen in 2021 and 2022, and appears this fall in Shifting Gears, reuniting with Allen and Richardson on network television for the first time in 27 years. In 1985, a few weeks after marrying actress Tootie Roche, a woman he had met doing a theater production, Karn's new wife collapsed suddenly at New York's Port Authority bus terminal. She had suffered a brain aneurysm and spent 3 days in a coma before making what her doctors described as a full recovery. Richard and Tootie have been married for 41 years now, have a son named Cooper, and Tootie herself appeared periodically on Home Improvement as one of Jill's sisters. When asked about the longevity of his marriage, Karn has attributed it to listening, to actively hearing the other person instead of waiting for your turn to speak. What most people never learned is how Richard Karn got the role of Al in the first place. He received a traffic citation, attended traffic school as required, and happened to sit next to an agent who told him about a new show that needed to recast a role. Stephen Tobolowsky had been set to play Al, but had a scheduling conflict with a film. Karn read for the part, was invited back for the pilot, and became a regular when the show was picked up by ABC. For the entire first season, unsure whether the show would survive, he kept his job managing an apartment complex on the side. Al Borland was the man who never got the credit, but Richard Karn turned dependability into a 4-decade career and a 4-decade marriage, which is more than most people manage with either. Number 4, we have Earl Hindman as Wilson W. Wilson Jr. Wilson was the voice from the other side of the fence, the philosopher neighbor, the gentle eccentric whose counsel Tim sought when he had exhausted every other option. The running joke was that you could never see his full face. What the joke concealed was that the actor behind it was one of the most fully formed people on the entire cast. Earl Hindman was 48 years old when Home Improvement began. He appeared in all 204 episodes, his face perpetually obscured by a fence rail, a prop, a balaclava, a mask, whatever the production required. Before the show, he had spent 30 years building a reputation as a serious stage and screen actor. He played Bob Reed for 16 years on Ryan's Hope, appeared in two of the most acclaimed political thrillers of the 1970s, The Parallax View and The Taking of Pelham 123, and worked Broadway and off-Broadway with the discipline and commitment of someone who considered theater his real vocation, not a stepping stone to television. He was married to actress Molly McGreevy for 27 years. She became the Reverend Molly McGreevy, serving as rector at St. Francis Episcopal Church in Stamford, Connecticut, where the couple lived. When asked what her husband was like when the cameras were off, she said simply, "He was the funniest human being she had ever met." They had no children. Molly died in 2015. Wilson's face was concealed for all 8 seasons of the show as a running joke, and in an episode that aired while the joke was in full effect, Wilson delivered the line to Tim with a completely straight expression. "I can't understand why a man would want to hide his face." By the time the 2003 reunion special was filmed, Hindman was terminally ill with lung cancer and could not appear on set. He recorded voiceovers from his sickbed, which the production used without alteration, because Wilson's voice was always all you needed. He died shortly after the special aired. In the final episode of the show in 1999, during the curtain call, Hindman stepped out from behind the fence in front of the studio audience and showed his full face for the first and only time. He had been a long-time smoker. Earl Hindman died on December 29, 2003, at age 61, from lung cancer. He died knowing that millions of people knew his voice, his eyes, and the warmth of his character, and had spent 8 years wondering what the rest of him looked like. Wilson was the man without a face, but Earl Hindman was a whole person. A stage actor, a husband of 27 years, a student of Shakespeare and Rabe, who gave comfort over a fence for 8 seasons and never once needed anyone to see him completely to be completely known. Number 5. We have Jonathan Taylor Thomas as Randy Taylor. Randy Taylor was the quick one, the middle son who had an answer for everything, who carried himself with a kind of easy confidence that made him seem older than he was. He was also the one the audience watched most closely, for reasons that had less to do with the character than with what was happening on the other side of the screen. Jonathan Taylor Thomas was born Jonathan Taylor Weiss on September 8, 1981. He was 9 years old when the show began and appeared in approximately 180 episodes before leaving in 1998, midway through the final season, to attend school. During the height of his fame in the mid-1990s, he was among the most photographed teenagers in America, with his face on the covers of Tiger Beat and 16 magazine for years running, and his voice coming out of a young Simba in Disney's The Lion King in 1994. At 44, in 2026, he has no social media presence, has not appeared on a red carpet in roughly 15 years, and has given almost no public interviews in this century. His parents divorced when he was young, and his mother served as his manager during his childhood years in Hollywood. He has never discussed long-term romantic relationships publicly. After leaving Home Improvement, he spent time at Harvard University studying philosophy and history from 2000 to 2002, studied abroad for a year at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland, and ultimately graduated from Columbia University School of General Studies in 2010, 12 years after walking off the set, under his legal name, Jonathan Weiss. His one visible return to the entertainment industry was directing 3 episodes of Last Man Standing between 2013 and 2015, briefly reuniting with Tim Allen. What is perhaps most striking is what he said about leaving. "I'd been going non-stop since I was 8 years old. I wanted to go to school, to travel, and have a bit of a break." He said this without drama. No collapse, no scandal, no public unraveling. Just a teenager who had spent his entire conscious life being watched by millions and decided, at the peak of his fame, to quietly put it down and go read a book in a library. "To sit in a big library amongst books and students," he said later, "that was pretty cool." Randy Taylor always had the answer, but Jonathan Taylor Thomas found the better question. What do you actually want your life to be? And spent 25 years answering it without an audience. Number 6, we have Taran Noah Smith as Mark Taylor. Mark was the youngest, the one who was still figuring out who he was while his older brothers had already staked their claims. He grew up on camera, season by season, in real time, and the show didn't always know what to do with that. Taran Noah Smith was born on April 8, 1984 in San Francisco. He was 7 years old when Home Improvement began. He appeared in more than 200 episodes and spent every formative year of his life on that set, surrounded by production schedules, camera operators, and the specific pressures of being a child actor whose parents had signed a 7-year contract on his behalf before he was old enough to have any opinion on the matter. He is 41 in 2026. He has not acted professionally in more than 2 decades. When the show ended in 1999, Smith enrolled at USC's film school with vague intentions of directing. He dropped out. At 17, the same year the show ended, he married Heidi Van Pelt, a nutritionist he had met at a raw food party in Los Angeles. She was 33. His parents publicly opposed the marriage. Together, Smith and Van Pelt founded Playfood, a California-based vegan food company specializing in organic and non-dairy products. The marriage fell apart in 2007 after 6 years. Their son, Nolan, was born in 2005. The divorce came with a lawsuit. Smith alleged Van Pelt had redirected company funds into her own separate business, and he eventually won control of Playfood. He also won a legal dispute with his own parents over his $1.5 million acting trust fund. In 2012, he was arrested for DUI and hashish possession and pleaded guilty to both charges. What Smith has said, in the rare moments when he has spoken publicly, is that he never got to choose this life. I started Home Improvement when I was 7, and the show ended when I was 16. I never had the chance to decide what I wanted to do with my life. He has since done disaster relief work in the Philippines, become technical manager for the Community Submersibles Project, where he teaches people to pilot submarines, and has said he would not allow his own child to become a child actor. Mark Taylor was always the thoughtful one, always slightly apart from the noise, but Taran Noah Smith built a life outside the frame, stranger, quieter, and more genuinely his own than anyone watching him grow up on screen could have predicted. Number 7. We have Zachery Ty Bryan as Brad Taylor. Brad was the oldest son, the jock, the natural, the one who seemed to move through high school without effort while his brothers overthought everything. He was the boy who had it together. His adult life has been one of the more painful trajectories in this cast's history. Zachery Ty Bryan was born on October 9, 1981. He was 9 years old when the show began and appeared in all 204 episodes, the eldest Taylor's son for 8 full seasons. After the show, he took small roles in Cold Case, ER, Smallville, and Veronica Mars, started his own production company, and by all accounts spent his 30s building a quiet life. He accumulated significant Bitcoin holdings, became involved in a tech startup, and attracted allegations from multiple sources that he had taken money from investors under fraudulent circumstances. Those allegations were never criminally charged. He has 3 children with Johnny Faye Cartwright, his former fiancée. In October 2020, Bryan was arrested in Eugene, Oregon, and charged with felony strangulation following a domestic dispute with Cartwright. The felony charge was reduced. He pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanor domestic violence charges and was sentenced to 3 years probation. In 2023, he was arrested again for felony domestic violence assault, pleaded guilty, and received 7 days in jail and a further period of supervised probation. He was arrested twice on DUI charges in 2024, once in California, once in Oklahoma. In January 2025, he was arrested in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, on second-degree domestic violence charges. On November 29, 2025, he was taken into custody for violating his probation. On February 23, 2026, 2 days before this script was written, Zachery Ty Bryan was sentenced to 16 months in county jail after pleading guilty to a felony DUI charge, his 3rd DUI conviction. The judge denied probation. He is currently incarcerated. He told TMZ in November 2025 that being put in the spotlight at 9 years old brought pressures I wasn't equipped to handle, and then added, without deflection, that he knew it was no justification for my choices as an adult. Brad Taylor was the big brother who had it all figured out, but Zachery Ty Bryan became a story about what happens when the pressures of a childhood no one asked for go unaddressed for long enough that they stop being private. Number 8. We have Pamela Anderson as Lisa, the Tool Time girl. Lisa was a small role, a presence more than a character, the kind of part that exists to hand tools to the leads and fill the frame. The woman playing her was already more than the frame could hold. and she left after 2 seasons for a show where everyone would finally understand that. Pamela Anderson was born on July 1, 1967, in Ladysmith, British Columbia, on Canada's 100th birthday, which earned her local press coverage within hours of her birth. She was 24 years old when she joined Home Improvement in 1991, the first Tool Time girl before Debbe Dunning replaced her in Season 3. She left because she was offered the role of C.J. Parker on Baywatch. It was, by almost any measure, the right call. Baywatch became the most-watched television program in the world during her tenure, drawing over 1 billion viewers weekly at its peak, and Anderson became one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. At 58 in 2026, she is in the middle of something that looks less like a revival and more like the industry finally catching up to her. Her romantic history has been turbulent and public. She married Tommy Lee in February 1995, a ceremony that occurred 4 days after they met, and they had 2 sons, Brandon and Dylan, before divorcing in 1998. She later married Kid Rock briefly in 2006, was married twice to Rick Salomon, and married construction worker Dan Hayhurst in 2020. They divorced in 2022. The most defining and most painful element of her public life has been the sex tape, filmed on her honeymoon with Tommy Lee, stolen from their home in 1995 and distributed without her consent. It circulated for decades, recontextualized her in tabloids and late-night jokes without her permission, and cast a long shadow over nearly everything that followed. What she said, in a 2023 Netflix documentary she produced herself, was that telling her own story was the only version of it she had ever been allowed to control. The Chicago Broadway run in 2022, her debut, at 54, as Roxy Hart, received real critical praise. The Last Showgirl in 2024 earned her a Golden Globe nomination alongside Jamie Lee Curtis. She arrived at the role of a showgirl forced to plan her future at 57 and brought something to it that no amount of tabloid coverage could have manufactured: the authority of someone who has actually lived through that reckoning. Lisa on Tool Time was a role designed to be forgotten, but Pamela Anderson spent 30 years proving that what the world chose not to take seriously was always the least interesting thing about her.